and thanks for tuning in to the Dream is Real podcast. This is a place to be if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in New York real estate. Before we get started, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. You don't want to miss an episode because we're going to keep putting out great content. Today, I am with Daniel Braga of Equitable Advisors. Daniel, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I consider this a special episode because you were there at the beginning when we just kicked off the podcast.
Yeah, I see the alerts all the time, so it's like it's very cool to see how this has grown. When LeVar first asked me, I hadn't really, no idea. I've known LeVar for quite some time, but to see all the different people that come, it's definitely something. It's a great tool. Absolutely. Like even me, I'm on my second home. I'm like, oh, okay. I find myself interesting. Oh, it's a good point. So it's really cool to see how it's grown.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's been a fun ride, and we're continuing to have subscribers sign on day in, day out. So let's talk a little bit about you. You are in financial advising, correct? Yeah. Even since we talked maybe about a year and a half ago, I'm sure a lot has changed. But to kind of reacclimate our audience with you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm 30 years in finance. I focus on long-term investing, basically 401k, retirement plans, IRA, 403b. But like from the first time we spoke, I like to correlate it to almost home ownership. When you buy a home, you generally get a 30-year mortgage. And when you start a job, that's kind of, you generally think I might have a retirement account for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. So I always kind of correlated the both of them. And I always tell people, like when you're buying a home, you're thinking long-term. Think long-term with your finances. And everything that I've said, kind of older people and people that have been there before me have told me. So I always feel like I speak at faculty meetings, administration meetings all over Long Island. And I love speaking to somebody in their 20s and 30s, and they generally say the same thing. I have no money.
Right.
Money's tight. I don't have enough money. And I get it. because I was there myself. My first job, I was working at ESPN. I was going to be a sportscaster. I then got into finance.
You have that vibe about you. So
people tell me that. Yeah. I did get offered a job, but again, this was before social media. I had to move out west to Iowa. And when I heard that, I was like, I don't even know where Iowa is. I was like, that's when I jumped into finance. I said, no, I'm going to stay in New York. But somebody told me, Dan, they're offering a retirement account. You got to get involved. And my normal reaction was like, I have no money. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. And I look back at that conversation that somebody told me over the past 30 years, there's no way I would have been able to save the same amount of money. Have I been disciplined? Definitely. I have changed careers. Like I said, I started in ESPN and I've been in finance now for 30 years. But I tell people, when you leave money in the bank, money gets spent.
Right.
It just does. If you have a family, if you have kids, it's just flying out. But when you have a retirement account and it comes out every week or every 2 weeks or once a month, that money just accumulates. And it really doesn't matter what's going on in the country, because when you're doing it long term, I'll get people like that. Oh, I don't like this president, or I don't like that president. Okay, that's 4 years, maybe 8 years. You're going to have this retirement plan 15, 20, 25, 30 years, if not more. So no matter what's going on in the country, COVID, Y2K, right, during 2000, America goes like that. They go up and down, but over the long term, there really isn't a better vehicle for saving money than just being disciplined and contributing to your retirement plan. I'm a big believer in that.
So I want to go back to something that you said before and how you correlate that with the buying of a house. And I just want to make sure, see if I understand. When you buy into a house, or let's say you get a mortgage for a home, you're ultimately paying into that and you're dropping down the principal on that. At the same time, the house, hopefully is moving up in value over the years, over the 30 years. So do you feel like is that the connection that you make as well? Is something that you are consciously putting into? It's part of your way of life, right? You're paying, in the case of a home, you're paying for where you live. In the case of this, you're setting aside some money that's kind of out of sight, out of mind at some point, and ultimately you get to the point where you're able to bear the fruit of that. Is that what I'm getting at?
Yes, exactly. So when you buy a home, that first home, and either you're by yourself or you have a partner, right away, you link up your bank account. And in 2025, there is no more writing a check to the mortgage company. It usually comes right out of your bank account. And that's the same way the retirement account. So you made an excellent point, like out of sight, out of mind. And you can, with a retirement account, you can really determine how much you want to contribute. Because even that, people are like, well, I don't have enough to start. Well, if we sit down, we could figure it out. There's
Right.
always an answer.
Right.
Just like in a mortgage, for your first home, should you be looking for a home you can't afford? Of course not. You try to figure it into your budget with the hopes that the property you buy over time goes up in value. And if you look back, even in the 30 years I'm talking about, if you look back at the stock market the past 30 years, where was Google? Where was Apple?
Right.
Where was Home Depot? Where was Costco?
I remember getting out of high school, jumping right into the stockbroking. They were talking about, you think it'll hit 10,000?
Yeah. And now,
Dating myself a little bit, but
no, but exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. My kids like to say, why don't they teach this in high school?
yeah.
I mean,
would agree.
this is basic stuff. And again, anything I'm ever saying, like generally I've just, listened to older people, listened to more experienced people, but the best investors we've ever seen, now you have in this day and age cryptocurrency, like, I don't know. I'm not saying you can't do well with it, but that's not really what I focus on. I focus on, the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And I've tried to instill that into my kids saying, you're going to jump into the workforce, get a little bit of knowledge. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to know a little bit. I knew nothing about home ownership, but over time, I did acquire knowledge, and now I know more now than I did 20 years ago when I bought my first home.
Yeah, I think, just by human nature, we want to know everything right now. And I think with this generation as well, I'm not throwing them under the bus, but, when we were growing up, you had to wait a little bit. Now you can get almost anything on demand. So I think that has, exacerbated that a little bit. But for those who are starting to think about their financial future, where should they begin?
So there's more options now than ever. For myself, I like to be a part of the team. I'm sure that's from my sports upbringing. I've always played sports my whole life. So I like being able to talk to people, work with people. So in finances, that's where I come in. So again, when I speak at retirement or faculty meetings or administration meetings, I always say, like, I'm here. You want help? I live in Smithtown. I have an office in Melville. I'm local. I'll sit with you and come up with a game plan because that's how I like to do things. The younger generation, sometimes all they want to do is just look at their phone, do everything on their own. But even in that case, yes, you could do that as well. I'm never going to say that can't work because if you're disciplined, and I know I use that word a lot from our first meeting, but I always come back to that. If you are disciplined, you could do it on your own. There are websites, there are apps now where when you spend money, and if there's like a change difference, again, not that I'm really familiar with, but people have told me this. So, if it's $1.90, I don't know, if it's $1.91, there's 9 cents change. That 9 cents can go into an investment.
I think it's called Acorn or something like that.
Something like that. Yes, that sounds familiar. So there's more options now than ever. So, to me, that's a great thing. Even this podcast, 20, 30 years ago, when I wanted information, I would ask people.
Right.
Like, this is a great tool. When you think about all the different speakers, again, I'm 53 years old. I'm still picking up stuff. That's the key too. You always want to be able to, you can't go into through life saying, I know everything. Nobody knows everything.
Yeah. If you're not learning, you're backtracking. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
I mean, some of the stuff is kind of cliche, but it's true.
Well, especially with how quickly everything's moving right now. Again, from the time you and I spoke about a year and a half ago, I'm sure we can fill up 4 or 5 shows with everything that's happened even in that time in different markets, different places. We've seen it here, just in the real estate market alone. Things are constantly changing.
Yep.
So I'm sure you've seen a ton over the course of, you said, 30 years in? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So I've had my retirement account 30 years. I bought my first house 20 years. So again, I like to correlate the two because the money comes out every month for my mortgage. And the same thing with my retirement account. And I know money in the bank, and I used to work in banks years ago. Like I said, money just gets spent. It just does, because when you see that bank total go up, even if you don't have a partner, even if you don't have kids, I can go on this vacation. Sure. I can go travel more. I can get the fancier car. Yeah, everyone's life's individualistic. So that's why I like saying, if you want help, I'm here. I'll always offer, no matter what age you are, if you want assistance, because somebody did that to me. And that's, I am passionate about that.
What about the individual that maybe waited, life changed? A lot of times, you're figuring yourself out in the 20s and 30s and these things happen. Somebody who gets into their 40s and then you start looking in the mirror, things are a little bit different. You start looking, you have kids, they're getting older, who feels like maybe they're not quite as prepared. And I'm sure it's a loaded question in a sense, but give a sense of where you would start with that individual.
So great point. And I do a lot of work in school districts on Long Island. So I sit with people on all spectrums. I'll sit with that 25-year-old who's just getting into the workforce. I actually just sat with a 23-year-old young woman. She just got a teaching job in Three Village. And I'm like, man, home run. Home run.
Right.
I'm like, you're sitting with me. I'm like, did your family tell you about this? No, I've just, I've seen commercials. So I'm like, you're going to have this account 30, 40 years. I don't know if I'm going to be around in that long, but I said, you're way ahead of the game. So on that aspect, a home run. Then I'll sit with people. I just spoke to a woman yesterday. She just retired, 74 years old. Dan, am I too old? So I said, this is a conversation worth having. Are you going to work? Yes, I'm always going to work. So then no, we could figure out something. So now you're 74 years old. You do have some money behind you. It depends on how much you want to contribute. So, people always say, did I miss the boat? And I'm like, miss the boat on what? What if you told me I made a ton of money, I sold my business, and I got this money sitting in the bank? Okay, well, I could come up with better options than you getting 2, 3, 4% sitting in the bank,
Sure.
and you getting a 1099 every 12 months.
If that, right?
Yeah, if that. I mean, that always changes, but yes, if that. So, it really depends. I don't ever like to say I missed the boat. No, you didn't.
So the 45-year-old that is that's saying, all right, I got to get serious about this now because I'd like to be somewhere when I'm 65 where I can make some moves. What you're just talking about a consistent contribution from this point on, and you could accumulate something reasonable. And
that's the key: consistency. So depending on how much you want to contribute, you could make up the years. If you want to tell me, I'm going to contribute, $50 a month at 50 years old. I mean, look, anything is better than nothing.
Right. Fair
But, if you want to sit here 20, 25, 30 years from now and expect like millions in the bank, I'm never going to say anything's impossible. The younger you are, obviously, the better. If you're going to start older, I would say, you do want to catch up. And again, it always comes down to people, generally, I don't have enough money. I do like to say, like, again, in this day and age, there are more options now than ever. So, here we're doing this. You could do multiple things. Even though I've been in finance for 30 years, I've bought and sold memorabilia my whole life, probably since even before I've been in finance. So I've always liked doing multiple things. And now more than ever, with Uber and things like that, Amazon, there's so many options. So, you can have your main job and maybe have like a side job to fund.
that. That's a very interesting concept. So I guess what you're saying is get the right team around you, have the conversation. We talk about this whether I'm having this conversation with a mortgage broker or someone else within real estate. A lot of times you almost don't want to confront, you should, but you don't want to confront it. But somebody like yourself can bring some clarity to an actual game plan, kind of wherever you are.
100%. And it's a lot different if I'm speaking to 100 people. Generally, someone doesn't want to raise their hand, have this spotlight on them. But I'm like, look, here's my number. If you can call me, you can text me. I will respond. You'd rather meet one-on-one. I get it. It's cool. There's no problem with that. But do something. Do something. Because if you have the discipline to get up every day and go to work, help yourself. I know when I was 24 years old, I wasn't thinking one day I'll be 65, but I'm closer to 65 than I am, 23, 24 years old.
Fair enough.
And I try to implement that on my kids. Like, think now, because nobody told me. I didn't have a mom and dad, telling me. So now I'm trying to do that with them. And again, my kids, and I love that line. Dad, why don't they teach us in high school? I'm like, this is just basic stuff.
Why don't you think that is more important in academia?
You know what I do think, and I don't want to get, this is like a rabbit hole, but it's almost like the American way, credit card debt and work forever and
Right.
pay off the debt. I mean, I got something in the mail the other day and it said 0% 18 months. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And then I'm looking after 18 months, 28%.
Yeah.
Like, how is that even legal?
Right.
And again, it
Right.
doesn't, and I'm not getting political, but I don't care, Democrat, Republican, that's always like that.
That's gonna bury. Yeah, you're right.
Like,
You're
no
right.
matter who the
Doesn't matter
president
who's
is.
in there. Yeah.
Like, how is that? Like, nobody talks about that. How is 28% legal?
So from your perspective, when somebody does sit down with you, what are some of the misconceptions that you find most often?
People are intimidated. And that's why I like to tell my story. It's like, I didn't go to Ivy League school. I didn't come from a family that, gave me millions of dollars. I didn't have any of that. I started my account at zero. I went to St. John's. I worked I was a waiter at Italian restaurants. I parked cars. Again, I did multiple stuff. Yes, I got a job at ESPN right after college. Then I transferred into finance and I've been there ever since. But I'm like, there really is there is no secret remedy. But if you're willing to, have that discipline and just maybe cut back on some things, I could give you a few suggestions. That's all.
Sure.
No matter what it is, and people, again, it always comes down to, I don't have enough money. Do you go to Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts? Someone usually says,
People don't like hearing that, right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm like, look, I love it. I love my coffee in the morning, but I make the Keurig, I pour the creamer in, I put it in a Starbucks, and I have it in my car. I have it in a Starbucks cup. I don't know. It tastes great to me.
So you can get creative to give some practical advice, but give us a sense as a financial advisor where you help initially, and then what is your ongoing role within your clients' lives.
So generally, really everyone's different. It really depends on the age. I can come up with suggestions no matter what point you are at life. The key is you have to be working, right? Because if you come to me and like, yeah, just hanging out, I'm like,
Right.
there's really not much I can offer. But if you're working and you're willing to maybe cut back on some things, we could start small.
So you go through, top to bottom, kind of their entire financial situation, income, outgo, all of that.
I'm willing to give whatever you want me to give.
Oh, I
So
see.
when I sit with you one-on-one, if you want to tell me all that, the better information, the more information you give me, the better we can come up with a game plan. If you're like, look, I don't feel comfortable, and it's just us two, I'm like, I can only do what you
Right.
allow me to do.
Yeah, you don't have a crystal ball. You
Yeah.
you can give broad best practices, but how do you really drill
Yeah, if
down?
I'm going to apply it to you individually, I do need some information. And sometimes it is an uncomfortable conversation because you do have to look at yourself in the mirror. But again, I'm going to give my life examples and maybe you could get something from that.
Excellent, excellent. And then the long term advising that you do, what does that entail?
So I always tell people I'm always present. I work in an office. I don't even know the number. There might be 300, 400, maybe 500 people. And I always hear the one thing in my office, I'll see people in their 80s working. And I look at that and I'm like, we're not breaking concrete. I'm like, I have no issue with that. I don't play golf. I play basketball. That's why I'm injured in a boot right now. But, I
Don't even bring up basketball. We had you had an episode. I was hitting every shot off camera, and then we turned our camera on.
And then
So
you
our
couldn't do
audience, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's how you hurt your foot, though, basketball.
Yeah, I cracked my ankle and heel. So
Oh.
I've been in a boot now for a bunch of weeks. But I never have these like grand visions. I want to retire and sit on an island. I feel like I'm going to do this forever. So as long as I'm here, I'm going to do it. So I grow with you. As you make more money and you want more options, I could give you more options. And at some point, I do talk to you about life insurance. I didn't even bring that up today.
Okay.
Because when you're 23 years old, if you even consider life insurance, again, things like, why don't they teach us in school? It's so cheap at 23 years old. If somebody told all of us to get a whole life policy at 23 years old, why wouldn't we?
Right.
But nobody's telling us this stuff.
Right. And so yeah, why don't we take kind of the pivot to what you feel is important to chat about, whether it be life insurance, whether it be around building long-term wealth. What's top of mind for you right now?
So when I know when I was in the Jericho area, I would have a lot of clients in Old Brookville, like $10 million homes. And again, I never grew up in a home like that, But I was always willing to listen to these people. You know, they were older than me, and they would harp on these things: long-term investing, life insurance. You do these things at a young age. And again, my mom never brought. My mom worked at a restaurant. You know, she was making cash some months weren't good. You know, some months were, but things like she never thought about. But I'm like, man, I said, and it's true. Like these things, if they were instilled in us as teenagers in our 20s, even in our 30s, it's like you're way ahead of the game. Because generally, people start looking for life insurance when, generally, when they have kids. I know myself. I'm
Right.
in the business.
Yeah.
I did not think about life insurance till my daughter was born.
Yeah, that was day one. That's when I started. So in my 30s.
And I
that
think
way.
mine was day one. I lived next to an Allstate. And he's like, Dan, you have life insurance? So I'm like, I said, I know my company has it. Well, you got to get it. Yeah, you have a baby in the house. So I wound up getting life insurance through Allstate, even though I offered it just because I was in a panic. My daughter's now 20 years old. I just took her to the airport this morning. She goes to school down in South Florida. But it's like, man, just like that.
Yeah.
Just like that. It's like time goes by so quickly. But these are the kind of things that, you know, if you start early enough, they're very affordable. But I don't want you to think, oh, well, you know, I'm too old. I missed the boat. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. That's where I think I could come in and I could offer my service and say, let's find a solution for you.
Awesome. And just to kind of dovetail over to go over to real estate here, where do you see real estate as part of long-term wealth building?
You know, to me, and if I use myself as an example, my first home I bought was in Smithtown. Me and my wife both worked. We rented prior to that, so we did save up, a decent amount for the down payment. The house over, I want to say 15, 16 years went up a little bit. I know in the past 5 years, real estate on Long Island really has gone up, but from I want to say 2004 to 2020, give or take, our property went up. So I did have equity. I always like paying a little bit more than the mortgage, even though I had a decent rate. And that equity, I went into a bigger house, again, in Smithtown, but I was able to put, I don't know, maybe 50, 60% of the cost of the home down. So my mortgage wouldn't be that much. And again, everyone's different. Some people are perfectly fine having a big mortgage. I locked in a rate on my second home at 3.5%. Some people are different. Some people I know, they do that 5-year adjustable rate. I was like, look, I'm comfortable with 3.5 for 30 years. And, you know, right now, obviously rates are higher.
It's looking pretty good right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking pretty good. So to me, if you're in the right area, and Long Island is the right area. Like if you're here long enough, home values are going to go up.
Right.
Again, is it going to be in your time frame? Who knows? You know, it could be 5 years. It could be 25 years. But if we look back at the past 50 years on Long Island, you know, again, correlated to the stock market.
Yeah. I as an example, the house I bought was purchased in the late 1960s, but for $17,000.
Yeah.
I paid a little bit more than that.
Wow.
A little bit more than that
Awesome.
when I bought it 4 years ago.
Wow. That's awesome.
So,
I'm sure there's some story to that. But
well, no. What I'm saying is that from what I paid for it versus the 17,000, like you said, it may not be. And I bought it from the original owner, so
yeah,
that's somebody who stayed. I mean, not everybody stays in their home like that now, but I mean, to your point, it's real estate can be a part of long-term wealth. I mean, we got to live somewhere, right?
Yeah. And to me, building equity in your own home that you own beats rent. And again, I know there's pros and cons. There's pros and cons to everything. But if I use myself as an example, I'm glad of my home ownership.
Well, a word that you used a few times, and I think is a very important word, is discipline. And I think correct me if you think I'm wrong, but to get a disciplined lifestyle where you're setting aside money in IRAs, mutual funds, whatever you would suggest, insurance. That is habits that get built that allow you to do things where if you want to invest in real estate, now you've got things compartmentalized and you can then be disciplined to really invest in a lot of areas and build your wealth however you want to build it. But it starts with that, sounds like the habits.
Yeah, really. And again, I know I say it a lot, but it is discipline. Before I came here, some video popped up and this guy was saying, For all you though, I forgot famous podcast. I forget his name, but he was saying, there is no excuse. You lost your job. Get up today, make your bed, take a shower, make sure you shave, go to the gym. You can't go to the gym, go walk around. You could do something.
Right.
Let's start with there. Come back to me the next day, and it's like, just start small.
That's it.
Just start small. But if you're going to be living in life and you're gonna have a partner and you want a family or you want home ownership, start small. Just start small. You work together, and over time, if you make the right decisions, good things will happen.
That's awesome. That's great advice, Dan. How can the audience get in touch with you to help them with their financial situation?
I can leave my number. It's 516-355-3359. You can always text that number. If you text me your name, information, I will reach back out to you. And that's kind of the easiest way. I have an email as well, but I know people like to text. Again, 516, I forget my number, so that's why I'm looking down. 355-3359. And if you text me your name, when's a good time to call? I'll call you back.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you also for tuning in. This is the Dream is Real podcast. If you want to keep up with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Dream Select Realty, on X at Dream Select Home. If you want to be part of this program, send us an email at hometeam@dreamselectrealty.com. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Just don't forget, the dream is real.